The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had conquered worlds, enslaved species, and crushed every rebellion that dared to rise against them. Among them, the Eth were the most feared. They stood 8 feet tall with skin like volcanic rock and eyes that burned with actual fire. Their claws could tear through starship metal. Their roar could stop a warrior's heart from pure terror. The other races called them demons, and for good reason. No species had ever defeated them in ground combat. No army had ever made them retreat. They were the Council's weapon of absolute destruction. When the Council discovered Earth, they expected another easy conquest. Their scanners showed a small blue planet with primitive technology. The humans had only recently discovered space travel. They had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no genetic enhancements. The Council laughed at the reports. This would take perhaps 3 days to complete. They sent the Eth as a message to the galaxy. They wanted every watching species to see what happened to new races. The demon warriors landed on Earth with 5,000 soldiers. They expected screaming. They expected surrender. They expected the same fear they always received. Instead, they found silence. The first Eth patrol walked into a forest in a region humans called Siberia. The snow was deep and the trees were thick. The demon warriors moved confidently. Their thermal vision showed no threats. Their scanners detected no weapons. They marched forward, certain of their dominance. They never saw the humans coming. The first Eth fell without a sound. A thin wire wrapped around his throat and pulled tight. Before his brothers could react, shadows erupted from the snow itself. White-clad figures moved with impossible speed. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like predators. They targeted joints and weak points that the Eth had never protected because no species had ever known about them. The entire patrol died in 43 seconds. Not one of them managed to send a distress signal. Commander received the report in his command ship orbiting Earth. He dismissed it as equipment failure. He sent another patrol, then another, then a full company of 200 warriors. None of them returned. None of them reported. They simply vanished into the forests, the mountains, and the cities of this strange little planet. Finally deployed ground sensors and surveillance drones. What he saw on the recordings changed everything he understood about war. The humans moved through terrain that should have been impassable. They swam through frozen rivers that would kill any other species. They climbed cliffs without equipment. They ran for distances that biology. But their physical abilities were not what terrified. It was their methods. These humans did not fight for glory. They did not announce themselves. They did not give their enemies a chance to surrender. They came in the darkness. They came in the silence. They killed without hesitation and disappeared before anyone could respond. They left bodies arranged in patterns meant to terrify. They used the Eth's own communication devices to send false orders. They turned the demon warriors against each other. Studied the recordings with growing horror. He watched a single human eliminate an entire outpost of 30 Eth. The human used no advanced weapons. He used a knife, his bare hands, and the environment itself. He drowned one warrior in a puddle barely 3 inches deep. He crushed another's skull with a rock. He simply watched as 2 Eth shot each other in confusion. The human's face showed no emotion, no anger, no fear, no satisfaction, just cold, calculated focus. Searched the human databases they had captured. He found the name for these warriors. The humans called them Special Forces. They had many divisions with many names. Navy SEALs, SAS, Green Berets, Delta Force. Each name carried countless stories of impossible victories and brutal efficiency. The database explained that these were not normal humans. They were selected from millions for their physical and mental strength. They were trained for years in the harshest conditions their planet could offer. They learned to survive where survival was impossible. They learned to kill in hundreds of different ways. They learned to endure pain that would break any other mind. But the training was not what made them terrifying. It was the selection process. Any candidate who showed too much aggression was rejected. Any candidate who enjoyed violence was rejected. The Special Forces did not want warriors who loved killing. They wanted warriors who could kill without it affecting them at all. They wanted humans who could do the most horrible things imaginable and still sleep peacefully that night. Understood now. The Eth were monsters who terrified their enemies through brutality and power, but the human special forces were something far worse. They were humans who had stripped away everything except pure effectiveness. They did not care about honor. They did not care about fair combat. They only cared about completing their mission. And their mission was to make the Eth leave Earth. The demon commander tried to adapt. He ordered his warriors to stay in large groups. He increased patrols and surveillance. He fortified every position. But the special forces adapted faster. They began targeting supply lines. They poisoned water reserves. They sabotaged equipment in ways that caused catastrophic failures. They captured Eth officers and extracted information through methods that made even the demon interrogators uncomfortable. One night woke to find a message written on the wall of his private quarters. The message was in the Eth language. It read simply, "We can reach you anywhere." He had 300 guards protecting his command center. Surveillance covered every angle. Energy shields blocked every entrance. But somehow, a human had entered his room, written the message and left without triggering a single alarm. Never slept well again. The war continued for 6 Earth months. The Eth lost 3,000 warriors. They had killed only 47 human Special Forces soldiers in return. Each of those 47 had taken at least 60 Eth with them before falling. Even in death, they fought. Several had detonated explosives strapped to their bodies when capture became inevitable. Others had transmitted vital intelligence with their last breaths. The Galactic Council watched these events with growing concern. They had never seen the Eth struggle. They had never seen any species resist so effectively. Other conquered races began to whisper about the humans. Hope spread through slave populations across 1,000 worlds. Council leader and summoned for a report. The demon commander stood before the assembled leaders of the galaxy and spoke truths that shook them to their core. The humans were not a weak species, he explained. They were an impossibly durable species that had hidden their true nature. Their planet was a death world. It had extreme temperatures, constant natural disasters, and millions of predators. The humans had not just survived this world. They had conquered it completely. They had tamed its most dangerous creatures. They had built cities in its harshest regions. They had adapted to every environment it offered. And in doing so, they had become something unique in the galaxy. They were persistence predators. They did not need to be faster or stronger than their prey. They simply needed to be more durable. They would chase their targets until those targets collapsed from exhaustion. They would take wounds that should be fatal and continue fighting. They would lose limbs and still crawl toward their enemies. The Special Forces represented the most extreme expression of this trait. They had taken humanity's natural endurance and it through training and selection. They could operate for days without sleep. They could function through injuries that would kill any Eth. They could maintain perfect focus through conditions that would break any mind. Told the council that he had seen a human Special Forces soldier complete his mission with 17 bullets in his body. The human had killed his target, transmitted his intelligence, and walked 3 miles to extraction before finally allowing himself to die. The council members shifted uncomfortably. They had built their empire on fear. They had used the Eth as their ultimate threat, but now they faced a species that could not be frightened. Worse, they faced a species that specialized in creating fear in others. Reports came from other invasion fronts. The humans had not just defended, they had counterattacked. Their special forces had infiltrated 3 Eth transport ships and disabled them from within. They had assassinated 2 high commanders on supposedly secure stations. They had rescued human prisoners from a detention facility that the council considered impenetrable. Each action carried the same message. The humans could reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. No rank provided protection. No security was sufficient. The Eth warriors began to hesitate before missions. They checked shadows that were empty. They startled at sounds that meant nothing. The demons who had terrorized the galaxy for now knew what it felt like to be hunted. Council leader and made a decision that had never been made in 10,000 years. He ordered a full retreat from human space. He declared Earth a forbidden zone. Any ship that approached would be destroyed by the Council itself. The humans were too dangerous to conquer. They were too effective to fight. The only solution was complete avoidance. The announcement spread across the galaxy. Slave species heard that a single planet had defeated the Eth. They heard that the demons had fled from creatures called humans. They heard about warriors named Special Forces who moved like ghosts and killed like nightmares. Rebellions erupted on 40 different worlds within 1 month. The humans were contacted by council representatives seeking peace. The human leaders agreed to negotiations. They sent diplomats who smiled and spoke of cooperation. They presented themselves as a reasonable species seeking only friendship. But behind those diplomats stood shadows, men and women who never spoke, never smiled, and never looked away from potential threats. The council representatives could feel their eyes. They could sense the controlled violence waiting just beneath the surface. These were the special forces. They attended every negotiation as a silent reminder. The galaxy learned an important lesson about humanity. The humans could be friendly. They could be generous. They could be wonderful allies and trading partners. Their culture produced beautiful art and profound philosophy. Their scientists made remarkable discoveries that benefited all species. But they were also capable of producing the most efficient killers in the known universe. They could take their own kind and transform them into weapons that even demons feared. They could create warriors who felt nothing, feared nothing, and stopped at nothing. The Galactic Council had conquered thousands of species by making them afraid, but they had finally met a species that had mastered fear itself. The humans did not conquer fear through courage or faith. They conquered it through training, discipline, and pure mental strength. They turned fear into a tool and used it against their enemies. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the special forces waited. They protected humanity without recognition or reward. They trained constantly for wars they hoped would never come. They prepared for threats that had not yet emerged. The galaxy looked at the stars and saw beauty. The demons looked at the stars and saw opportunities. But the special forces looked at the stars and saw 1,000 potential battlefields. They studied alien biology for weaknesses. They developed new tactics for every environment. They pushed their bodies and minds beyond any reasonable limit. They were humanity's answer to a hostile universe. They were not heroes from stories. They were professionals who did terrible things so that others could live in peace. They were the sharp edge of human evolution, honed by millions of years of survival into something the galaxy had never imagined possible. The Eth still told stories about Earth. They warned their young warriors about the small creatures who lived there. They described the special forces in terms usually reserved for supernatural beings. They spoke of humans who could not be stopped, could not be found, and could not be killed by any conventional means. In the demon language, they had no word for special forces. They simply called them the inevitable ones. And across the galaxy, other species began to learn that humanity's friendship was the most valuable thing they could earn. Because the alternative was becoming the enemy of creatures that made demons run in fear. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but humanity had produced something vast enough and dangerous enough to meet it. They called them special forces. The galaxy called them nightmares. And in the cold silence between stars, they waited for the next threat to emerge. They always would.